Hey guys, hope you're well. For today's 16-bit review, we are going to be testing our run and gun skills with Jurassic Park 2, The Chaos Continues. This 1995 release is one of those games we rented way back when, and I would watch my older brother and his friends try to get as far as they could on 2-player. After consulting with the manual, the two playable characters are Alan Grant, from the movie of course, and the second player is a bit more mysterious, a tactical sergeant named Michael Wolfskin. While it's pretty cool that Jurassic Park has a second player option, you can't celebrate too soon because you would be amazed by how harshly difficult this prehistoric adventure really is. So the intro does a good enough job at letting you know what's going on, plus it's pretty interesting to see these kinds of cutscenes on the Super Nintendo. But basically, Biosyn Corp is making an aggressive and greedy move on Jurassic Park, seemingly trying to take it over by force, as their leader explains that his men are on the way.
My men are on their way.
You may realize what that means. It's not just dinosaurs that we'll be encountering on this adventure, but a variety of human soldiers will be taking aim at us as well.
Prepare for drop! Go!
Like I was saying earlier, this game is incredibly challenging to finish. While the numerous dinosaurs and people come in a dangerous variety, the three completely nut-crunching issues are, number one, there are no in-level checkpoints. If you die just once, you're immediately hit with this game over screen, which is brutal. It's also something that absolutely terrified and discouraged me from continuing to play as a kid. On top of the complete absence of any checkpoints, the levels aren't short or simple at all either, which really makes it the worst of both worlds. To give you an idea, if you're going about this at a moderately cautious pace along with not knowing the exact route from start to finish, these are literally around or beyond 10-minute levels. Imagine what that could do to your spirits, trying to barely scrape by and hang in there for multiple attempts ranging from a few to 10 minutes just to get sent right back to the beginning over and over again. And you really start to realize that even with your best effort, that you may not actually get anywhere in this game. Number two, the levels aren't always straightforward. You would be amazed at just how much more frustrating a game can be when it not only sends you back to the very beginning, but also has some forks in the road that ultimately lead to rooms full of enemies that reward you with a dead end, or entryways that can continue in a wandering loop, unsure of where to go for eternity, until all of the respawned enemies eventually finish you off. You have to know where to go in order to get through this game. It's only once you get that clear idea of where to go and gain some confidence is when those daunting 8 to 12 minute levels turn into 3 to 6 minute sprints. On top of no in-level checkpoints and some confusing level layouts, you have true game overs, which means only a handful of deaths means you're starting the entire game all over, back at the start screen. For those that have played this game before, they know exactly how all of this adds up to make it one of the most cutthroat experiences out there on the Super Nintendo, but I'm sure they'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention that the game, despite being criticized by some reviewers at the time, does in fact have some pretty neat settings, an interesting mix of weapons, and a pretty epic soundtrack too. At a glance, there are 6 missions to choose from, but you also have emergency missions that pop up after you complete a level. So all of a sudden, we're looking at 12 daunting challenges before the final stretch to the end of the game. We've definitely set the stakes high enough. Let's now see what it takes to steer Alan Grant to the finish line as we attempt to reclaim Jurassic Park for the second time. In the name of Ingen, with The Chaos Continues, I'm Jeff, and this is Marmax Gaming. So like I was saying earlier, you have 6 missions to choose from, Mega Man style, which is extremely fortunate because with those 3 issues we just discussed, definitely need to use every chance at mastering a different level before you can realistically make it through all 6 of them in a single attempt. Let's go ahead and take on Raptor Attack. There are a couple quick things to explain. So as mentioned earlier, this game is basically a run and gun style, and you have 6 weapons to use. With the R shoulder button, you have some guns that are mainly good for taking out dinosaurs, and what I mean by that is they won't work on your human enemies. Plus, as far as the game is concerned, they don't technically kill the dinosaurs. You see the dinosaur counter up here? You don't actually want this to go down too far. It goes down if you kill any dinosaur enemies aside from the raptors. The idea being that these dinosaurs are irreplaceable assets of Ingen, and you're not trying to wipe out the park. Raptors, on the other hand, are described as creatures that you can absolutely afford to kill since they're an abundant, dangerous liability to the people, the park, and the other dinosaurs in general. You have a white plasma type of gun that can charge and be released for 3 times damage, with unlimited ammo. Your two stronger weapons with limited ammo are the machine gun of tranquilizers and a more powerful explosive weapon. Using the L shoulder button, you cycle through actual guns with bullets. Your standard gun fires at a mediocre pace with unlimited ammo. Your two stronger weapons are just like the other two strong weapons, with a machine gun and a shotgun. And these are the weapons to use on the human enemies. Now that's out of the way, we can move along. Raptor Attack is certainly true to its name. There's a surplus of raptors and other dinosaurs running around. Dealing with raptors in general can be pretty tough, since they run onto the screen so quickly and do decent damage to you too. This is where you have to be ready to jump right over them. Ducking doesn't really work, since holding down actually has them spamming low jump attacks. There are a few different colored raptors, green being the weakest, needing 3 shots, the brown ones need 6, and the even more brown ones need 9. Almost all of the other dinosaurs go down with a single shot, aside from the spitting Dilophosauruses, which takes a few shots too. I know I'm kind of dumping a lot of info, just want to give you a real understanding of what it's like as we make it through these levels. This level, like many of them, start out in the jungle setting, has some really cool soothing music with it, and some nice scrolling going on too with the layers in the back and the foreground. It even notoriously covers the very first upward pointing arrow, but it's never an issue or confusing throughout the rest of the game. After getting through some dinos and avoiding the high voltage fences, we enter one of the game's large underground bunkers. As you can clearly hear and see, this game does a nice job of keeping a creepy and suspenseful tone. I love the way they did the lighting, how it's darker behind you and further away. Makes a lot of sense and adds to the environment. Basically with raptors, you have to get super used to just jumping right over them and continuing to run away, hoping they'll clip out from being far enough out of the screen. Or you will have to be ready to turn around to shoot, jump, and repeat as necessary. They're definitely pretty intimidating and scary, but can be handled if you stay calm. But what you never want is to have multiple of these on the screen, because that's when it becomes nearly impossible to avoid major problems. A couple things to note about your control that will greatly help you once you realize it is that you can jump up and away from ladders to save yourself time as you move up them quickly. Plus you can also use ladder jumping to pull off some pretty cool and helpful maneuvers. Another ability that you have and I need to mention is, although you don't have an anchor button for your feet while you shoot, you can actually remain still and point upward diagonally if you point your gun up straight first and then aim. As we move along, you may notice that your frames of animation are actually quite fluid and impressive, which adds to the game's feeling of realism in a big way. Speaking of realism, your dodge button is pretty much useless in just about any situation, so you really should avoid using it all the time. Basically, just forget that it exists and never touch the X button. As these levels go on, it would get super tedious and redundant if we looked at this only one step at a time, so we'll definitely be chopping it up as we go. There was just a lot of information to get out there to start this video properly. You have a ton of raptors to look out for. It's a constant theme of being really careful, and the game does have the occasional first aid kit waiting in certain spots, and it's just all about pacing yourself to actually reach those, then continue on as safely as you can. If you know exactly where to go and what you're doing in this level, it'll take you about 5 minutes to reach this point, where you get a couple first aid kits right before you activate this facility's emergency toxic gas switch. You're then given just 40 seconds to try to make it to the exit as your health is drained by the gas, so getting hit by only a raptor or two puts you in serious jeopardy of dying, whether that's damage or from the time. As long as you know what's out there and really don't mess around, you'll get out of there with a solid 10 seconds or so left. The first emergency mission they throw your way is to locate a scientist that is apparently stranded out in the jungle due to a vehicle breakdown. You need to find him before Biosyn does. Here's where we encounter the humans. There's a variety to them, with some more dangerous than others. Perfect example of that, the flamethrower guys. Anybody that's played this game before knows that these guys can be the bane of your existence. If you don't quickly and properly react, like a crouch too close or stand in the wrong spot, half of your health or more will be gone in just a second or two. We run into them in all kinds of awkward situations. You really need to be ready to jump away immediately as soon as you see them. There are also some explosive throwing guys that can be quite annoying, depending on where they're positioned at. There are also kneeling missile soldiers that absorb a good amount of shots and can catch you off guard too. The more numerous and less dangerous soldiers are these white and black guys running or standing around, and just like the raptors, the different colors mean something too, which is pretty funny. The black guys can take another bullet, shoot faster, and even run a bit faster than the one-shot white guys. For a lot of these types of stages, with enemies like this and a timer involved, you'll probably want to use the shotgun quite a bit. There's a lot to look out for, you have to be pretty dialed in with your reactions if you don't happen to have the game memorized. I'd say that the constant danger that you run into, with how quickly you often need to react to things, really gives this game quite a bit of tension. So after finding the scientist, we're officially able to select the next level. Let's move on to TRex Carnage, where we actually do encounter a T-Rex, but not before another stretch of jungle and raptors. Essentially, it's just a matter of somehow getting used to how quickly many of these enemies come on screen, and if you do get knocked down, trying to recover and keep the damage to a minimum. Fortunately, there is a health and some ammunition right before the big moment. This is actually pretty dang intense. Basically, the T-Rex will overtake your space if you aren't hitting him with enough firepower. There are also these guys hanging from vines just waiting to shoot at you, which is pretty annoying, but you just need to keep it as simple as possible while not leaving much time between firing your shots. The ending of the section is bound to catch you by surprise though, without any type of warning either, so that means you really need to react to this quickly or anticipate based on where you're at in the song after some trial and error. After your poor driver drives right into the pit, we make that jump to the vine and cross to the right. We've officially beaten our second mission. The second emergency mission doesn't really play around. You can already see based on the timer that it's significantly longer at nearly 7 minutes of time. You have a main hallway with 5 doors you need to go in. Your task is to collect the 5 portable power supplies and attach them at the end to the powerless incubators. The challenge is simply moving quickly enough while not being careless and losing your life, which can happen pretty easily getting chipped away, or also very quickly if you make any real costly mistakes. If you can manage to play really tight, there are a couple first aid boxes along the way that you'll be begging for if your run was anything but perfect up until that point. It makes sense to use the shotgun throughout the stage since they give you quite a bit of ammunition a handful of times, and it often helps you move through things the fastest. Time sections like these can be made a bit easier when you are jumping from the ladders. Just need to be careful, of course, because you do take significant falling damage if you're ever high enough. After learning where these 5 power generators are and grabbing each one of them, we are allowed into the final room where we can finish things off, which includes stopping the Biosyn engineers from cutting off more power feeds. Third mission, the blockade. Here we go. So the overall direction and goal of this one is actually pretty confusing depending on how you play the level. It's a difficult blend of soldiers throughout several rooms and minutes, with the occasional moments of having to stop for certain enemies and situations. The music, by the way, is pretty epic and immediately makes me think of some Linkin Park instrumentals. Plus has a really sick chorus. I'd like to compliment a really cool touch they added for these tank explosions, specifically if you take out the flamethrower guys from underneath. That's pretty awesome. You have a section with a bunch of giant fans that you just need to shoot through, along with some intermittent enemies along the way. Eventually you'll find yourself going down and you wouldn't know it at first, but the way to end the mission is actually right in this room, and what makes it so confusing is that the level continues for a really long time, if you were to exit the room to the right, which absolutely frustrated and confused the crap out of me since you'll inevitably die and think that there's still further to go. But no, what you need to do is actually take out this large flamethrower enemy. You have this other guy too, he's like a super cop, that takes more bullets than most enemies. He's smarter and more sophisticated than other enemies too. So basically you need to give yourself some space to properly take him out so you're not standing right over the flamethrower, then it's just a mash of your shotgun and alternating some ducking with standing in order to take down the Schwarzenegger-like beast. The third emergency mission is a really tough one. You have to go very far in another 400-second grind with more raptors and soldiers, just an abundant amount with so far to go. It has an interesting way about it a few times, like having to climb up and drop down a bunch of levels while needing to be mindful of where enemies are, and also not to accidentally drop through to a bottomless pit. There are a couple alternate paths that are pretty short but lead you to the same route. I mean, it's just minutes of tough enemies, and nothing less than pretty dang precise is going to get you through a section like this. Plus, even though they give you a lot of time, don't think that means that you have a lot of room for error, because you don't. I didn't even try to take my time at all, and after almost 7 minutes, the time went out, and that means starting it back from the beginning. Having to deal with trying to hurry while also having enemies like raptors that punish you for improper quick reactions, along with enemies that stop you right in your tracks, like the flamethrower guys, is just a lot. You need to be scrappy to put together the best run that you can. Every second and hit counts. As you can clearly see, things can absolutely come down to the wire. At the end, after a couple more raptors, you have a little random puzzle to shoot 4 blocks in a certain order to finish the level. And on this run, they just went from left to right. But it can be trickier than that, of course. 4th mission. High Terra. So this one is about having to scale a mountainside and making our way to a radio antenna that was damaged due to a fierce storm. And we need to repair that since it's causing major disruptions with our supply line. Things start out in a jungle per usual with some raptors to deal with, but it doesn't take long until you find yourself on the mountainside. There are falling rocks and a lot of flying enemies to deal with on the stage. Have to mention that the music may catch you by surprise because it gets an 11 out of 10 in the epic and triumphant categories. I want to call all of these flying enemies pterodactyls, and some of them most certainly are exactly that, but these things just look freaking bizarre, as if they're from Star Wars or something. Many of the enemies in Jurassic Park 2 do not respawn once they're defeated, although the less significant one-shot enemies actually seem to infinitely come back. And you know what that means, you have to avoid doing anything but moving forward, otherwise you can easily get worn down. They're pretty dang annoying too, since they can come at you in numbers in some weird angles. The tough part about this level is that it has a couple wrong ways to go that would take you at least a good 2 or 3 minutes or so before you realize that you need to turn around and find the right way. Keeping in mind that the respawn enemies will be something you need to face coming and going. It takes a bit of figuring out to realize what the most direct and fastest route is, but when you do, it only takes a few minutes to finally leave the cliffside and make your way up to the tower. Once you're here, just a bunch of soldiers standing between you and the end of the level. Overall, as long as you aren't too sloppy about it, you'll be able to at least reach the health and finish the level off. The 4th emergency mission is fortunately a lot shorter than the last couple, but do not mistake it for being easy because this is definitely a sprint that you'll need your shotgun for, along with a ton of precise jumping and shooting. There are a bunch of running and standing soldiers that aren't too bad, but you're bound to get caught off guard by just how many flamethrower soldiers there are, which can easily end your life or take a huge chunk away if you only make the slightest of mistakes when trying to turn away from and get in proper position. But that's really all there is to say. It's a short sprint with a lot of danger along the way, and you'll probably die a couple times until you know what to expect and get really precise. Our 5th mission must have had Metallica on their mind with Seek and Destroy. It's actually a pretty weird scenario. It says that you suspect illegal breeding on the island due to the discovery of a baby raptor hidden deep under the volcano. Those caves underneath the volcano are large, so you have attached a transmitter to the baby raptor and hope to track it back to you. Once you find the nest is when you need to plant the explosives and exit the volcano before the blast destroys you as well. So after we jump over a couple raptors in the jungle, we enter the volcanic caves, and oh my gosh, this right here is probably the most intimidating and challenging of all of the mission. This type of maze-like activity with enemies that come back as you enter and exit rooms is just brutal and could drag on for the longest time. Several forks in the road that could loop endlessly if you're not really paying attention, and it would be one thing if the enemies stayed dead as you went along, but no, they're always going to be there, so it can be very dangerous, tedious, and confusing on where you've been. The raptors and flying enemies, along with the hazards out there, are bound to make your life plenty miserable. Definitely need to be decisive and as deadly as possible as you make your way through this one. I can't overstate how much getting lost and worn down by this level is such a factor, along with each death starting you all the way back at the beginning. But when you actually know what you're doing, the level takes a few minutes to get where you need to go. Shortly after picking up the tracker, we are just a couple turns away from the deadly exit. Before it's too late to mention, there's some really solid layering and scrolling going on here, which really does add to the dimensions and depth of the level. If you ever had the absurd thought that you needed more raptors in your life, well, brace yourself, because we are about to be in their nest, which means just about every screen length or so has one running in on you. This doesn't change when you're running for your life away from that blast either, with any single one of these raptors meaning instant death if they come in contact with you. But when you finally manage to nail it with your jumping and your shotgun, you feel like the baddest man alive. Alright, so our fifth emergency mission. You have to track down a spy and you're in the jungle environment again. The design of the spy is pretty funny, looking suspicious as all hell. It'll show him running away from you not only at the beginning, but a few other times as you move along in the stage. While the concept of running through a barrage of tough enemies with a time limit is nothing new, Jurassic Park 2 has plenty of moments that feel unique since you do have to approach those couple of spots differently than other moments that you've run into. It's a ton of soldiers, some dinosaurs, and fortunately it's not the hardest level out there, and you've developed a lot of familiarity and skill in order to get this far. There are definitely those moments where you need to barely get an enemy on screen to take them out, and just being super careful in general while also not messing around or wasting time. Every level is bound to probably kill you at least once, probably a few more times than that, until you finally get it down and can finish it off when you eventually reach the spy at the very end. Sixth mission, protect the Gallimimus. Had to look that one up. Basically, Biosyn is out here slaughtering them and trying to capture live ones as part of their DNA research. And simply put, you cannot allow this to happen. Which means we have another level of tearing up a bunch of soldiers while trying to be as agile as possible so we can make it to the couple of health refills along the way. It's pretty funny how the people on the Gallimimus stage act a whole lot like the Gallimimus, just mindlessly running left and right, bouncing right off of rocks. With of course plenty of others that will throw explosives, launch missiles, or as you already know, stop you dead in your tracks with a flamethrower. It's a pretty cool stage though, very arcade feeling, you can't get lost at all, and it's just about you proceeding to the right and surviving. You even get a cool little boss teaser about halfway through the level. Eventually, after a whole lot of running, jumping, and shooting, you encounter the helicopter boss fight, and my goodness, this thing is designed to catch you off guard. It immediately comes in swinging a cage, and you need to shoot that thing down as quickly as possible. It's pretty challenging to avoid everything that's going on. The main focus for you needs to be avoiding what you can while also making sure you're shooting at every given opportunity. Once the cage falls, the fight opens up a bit more since you don't need to constantly duck. It can focus on shooting upward at the helicopter. Plenty of bullets and explosives come your way though, so you need to be calm in the pocket with your decisions until you finally take this thing down. The sixth emergency mission takes place on another mountainside. It's up to you to find a scout on your team that's managed to snag the keycard to the Biosyn headquarters, but he lost his footing on the cliffs and is in critical condition, so it's up to you to find him before his time runs out. As far as confusing levels go, this one is also horrendous. There's fortunately often just one other cave to go into on most screens, but you could easily go the wrong way at some points, and the biggest challenge is getting through all of the enemies and hazards between you and the end of the level. I don't mean to skimp over any details, we're on level 12 here already, but still have an ending section to take on. This isn't necessarily a super short game for a sit down and play through either. You could easily take upwards of over an hour to get this far. There are some slightly different and dangerous setups, just as we've grown to expect from the game up until this point. As long as you're able to figure out where to go after hopefully not much more than a try or two, you should be able to reach the scout with plenty of time left. It's also your health that you need to be the most cautious with. Every shot that you can avoid counts, especially in situations like this. here we are at the Biosyn headquarters. The mission is simple. Use whatever force necessary to remove the enemy. And it's exactly what it sounds like, a long stretch through this indoor setting with plenty of soldiers of various kinds to get in your way. It calls on your reflexes in a tough marathon type of deal, and yeah, you need to come ready if you don't want to make a silly mistake just to get sent back all the way to the beginning of the game. Which is exactly what happened to me, and oh man, starting this game over from this point, how brutal can it get? You know what's really important to know, actually, is that we can only get the real ending with 2 extra secret levels if we complete this game on hard. Not only does that make this difficult game even more dangerous, but it slashes your continues from 6 to 3, as if this game wasn't already a complete ordeal to finish.